So I used to believe that my story started with this little boy, my son. I used to believe that it started with the mornings when I would often have to take him to school in his pyjamas. Teeth unbrushed, hair a state, because the thought of going to that institution and to that environment triggered something inside of him that he couldn't control. And he'd melt down, he'd kick, scream, and he'd cry. And quite often I'd have to carry him across the playground and people would watch. And as they watched, I think to myself, misunderstood. Because through his times of challenge, he would self-stimulate, a way to soothe his anxiety. Sometimes he'd rock, he would fidget, he'd make noises, he'd squeeze blue tack, because that's the only thing the school would give him. And people would think that he was strange. People wouldn't understand. They'd think he was disruptive. And one time the head teacher burst into his classroom and he physically removed from class. And I don't mean gently, and I don't mean calmly, I mean he dragged him out. And another time I went to pick up, and the teacher said to me, "I had a great day today." And he showed me a photo of my 7-year-old child wrapped in a fluffy blanket he'd taken into school for survival, in the fetal position. Tears streaming down his face, pens and pencils everywhere that he'd thrown, and paper from the display boards that he'd destroyed. Because he'd had a meltdown. Because that environment had got his nervous system to that point. And I thought to myself, why in this moment did you think the right thing to do was to take a photo? This is a 7-year-old, clearly in distress, embarrassed in front of his peers, and you, teacher, allowed him to get to this point, and you left him there. And I left the school that day and many other days, and I would go back to my car in the morning, and I would cry. And I don't mean one tear, I mean hands on the steering wheel, trying to catch your breath because you're full body crying. And I would ask myself, what do I do? Who do I talk to? How do I fix this? How do I fight a system that seems so much bigger than me? And as I watched through the years, I started to recognise his story, the fear that he carried about being different, the anxiety that he had by going into these institutions. It all became really familiar to me. And I started to realise that it wasn't just a story, it was mine. And when I was a child, I was classed as a fiercely independent child. My mum would say it all the time, Keegan's independent, and people would think it was a compliment. But what they didn't see was a lot of that independence, a lot of that isolation was because of sensory needs, because the thought of being close to others made my skin crawl. The thought of cuddles, couldn't bear it, not even with my own mother. And kisses, let's not even start about kisses, the mouths and the spit, gross, really gross. And sometimes when I was forced to be in public spaces around others, family days out or gatherings, that sort of thing, I'd come home and I'd feel so overwhelmed, and I too would melt down. And it was like an explosion. And my mum, she'd burst into my room and not know what to do, and she'd shout, What are you doing? This isn't normal. You are not normal. And we can laugh about it now. But as a child, it wasn't funny because the way I behaved, it offended people. They used to say, why don't you kiss your grandma goodbye? Why don't you hug your mum? Why are you so morose? And as a child, I would internalise that. Because I didn't know to say, oh, well, I have a sensory system that processes touch differently. I didn't know that. So I would internalise this, and I would see myself as having flaws. I think, why is everyone else okay with this? Why is this something I find so difficult? What is wrong with me? And then I started the school system. And when I started school, I became the teacher's pet. And I'm not afraid to admit it, and I'm sure there's lots of you in this room that were also the teacher's pet. I'm sure you know who you are. But the thing is, school comes with a rule book, the curriculum, the right answers. And if you can master the system, then you can be safe. Nobody will know that you are different. So that's what I did. I became the teacher's pet. I mastered the system. I was the one with the certificates. I was the one best in class. And people would look at photos like this, probably not this one, I don't look particularly happy. They would look at me and they would think, oh, she did great. And I did, but it wasn't because I was confident. It was because I was trying to cover up my confusion in the world. Because the reality is I didn't understand people. I didn't understand why, when you were honest, it might offend people. Why, when someone asked you a question and you gave an answer bluntly, it was rude. Or if you were logical, it was cold. Or if you were too direct, it was harsh. It made no sense to me. So I did what I did to try to fit in, to try to be accepted. And I used to be told all the time, you're too bossy, you're too critical, you're too much, you're too loud. So I covered it up, I internalised, and I adjusted myself. And around age 6, 7, thank you, I did everything, every club. I was chess champion, knitting club, sewing club, netball, choir, litter picking, you name it, I did it. Because praise was protection. And I needed to get that tick to feel validated, accepted and safe. And I started talking to people, saying the things that they wanted to hear. I learnt how to be popular. But the thing is, I didn't learn how to fit in. I learned how to fake it, even though inside my brain was screaming that it wanted to be authentic, it wanted to tell the truth, but I couldn't. In order to be accepted, I couldn't. And that skill, masking as we call it now, followed me all the way into the workplace. Now, when I entered the world of work, this is when the self-doubt really kicked in, because in the workplace there is always someone with more experience than you. There is always someone who has the answers. And when you've spent your entire life giving the right answers in order to cover up who you really are, this idea that I didn't have the answers was so overwhelming, devastating to me. So I focused my energy on learning, on evolving, on observing. And I started my career in customer services, and then I moved up into marketing and I managed a team. And it was at this point that the imposter syndrome really kicked in, and it was like a record running through my mind all of the time. They're going to figure you out, they're going to know you can't do it, they're going to see that you're a fake. So I doubled down. I started a master's in marketing whilst working full-time. So I would work Monday to Friday, and then on a Saturday I would go to university, and in the evenings I would complete my assignments, sometimes till 1 a.m, 2 a.m, 3 a.m. But life doesn't stop because of your ambition, and at the time I had a 1-year-old who was undiagnosed autistic, and I was trying to be there to support him. But the world around me, even my family, were saying, Keegan, you can't possibly know that he's autistic. He's effectively a difficult child. So they told me, you need to discipline him more, you need to be firmer, you need to put in place more boundaries. And of course, that just made him more overwhelmed. It created more meltdowns for him. And so I was juggling it all. My own fear, my own anxiety, my own desire and determination to prove myself, daily meltdowns from my son, and all the while, I'm just trying to keep achieving so I can feel safe. And he needed me to translate the world for him because he was very logical, and he would be told things like, don't tell lies. And so he'd say, Nanny, I don't want your food, it tastes gross. No, don't lie, that's impolite. And I always find that a juxtaposition. You're told to not lie, but actually lie when your grandma's food tastes like cardboard. It makes no sense. Makes no sense. But anyway, in spite of juggling it all, I knew that somehow I had to make it through. We had to make it through. Even though all the time my imposter syndrome was screaming at me. And this is where I get a bit more vulnerable. But I have to, because talking about neurodivergence like it's only a superpower is telling a half-truth, and half-truths help nobody. So, people with ADHD, particularly women, they are very good at masking. But inside, they're impulsive, procrastinating, putting themselves under severe pressure, beating themselves up when they cannot meet that pressure. And a lot of us will internalise that as our own flaws. We will think, this is something that is inherently wrong with me. I need to improve, I need to change, I need to be like everyone else and handle this and be better. So what do? We compensate by being passionate. And passion is a really beautiful thing. And people respond really well to it. They see you, they elevate you, they give you more responsibilities. And you say, yes, that's amazing, thanks, yes, of course I can do it. And the fear of being found out, the fear of letting them down means you take on more and more. Yes, sir, I can do that one thing on top of the 3 things that you gave me last week. Yes, of course I will. And it becomes a cycle. You can't tell them that you're not okay, but nobody can be 100% all of the time. And there was one point in my career where I was working really, really hard for a company, and I felt like maybe in this company I was safe and I could be my authentic self. And I had noticed that one of the managers that was part of my team, I believed, was mistreating staff. He was showing a lot of bias and he was upsetting people. So one day I spoke to a member of the leadership team at a social gathering, and I told him. And I was being authentically me, so I was direct, I was passionate, but I was telling the truth. And the next day, I walked into a disciplinary letter from HR. 4 out of 5 grievances that leader had written on that disciplinary letter were totally false. And HR could never substantiate it. And that situation really taught me something. It taught me that when you are authentic, when you tell the truth, you can be hurt. It taught me that sometimes speaking up on the injustice does not make you a hero. Sometimes politics can punish you for being pure. So what did I do next? I masked. I masked harder. I said, yes, sir, give me more. Yes, sir, I can do it. I covered myself up. I needed to fit in. But the trouble is, this overspills to your home life. When work is too much, it always overspills. So 6 o'clock came, I was supposed to finish work, and my son would come to my desk. And I'd go, no, I can't do this right now. I need to finish my work. That then led into family stress. It put strain on the family at home. And I remember thinking, I am failing at everything. I am failing at every point in my life. And it felt like I was drowning. And the weighing scales became too heavy. And this is the thing, it is a vicious spiral, because we say yes and we keep going, but it can cost you your health and it can cost you your home. I'm going to pause for a moment because you've heard a bit about me and I need to collect myself. But this is not just my story. This is a shared story. And now we're going to hear from some others in the IT community that wanted to tell you theirs. So just for a minute, I want you to all just look around the room, look at all the flannel everywhere. Because this is what inclusion looks like. This is creating safety, not trying to fix people, not trying to change people, but accepting people. And now I'm going to ask you to do something that may feel a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to ask you to think, just not out loud, just in your head. When you hear the stories today, has it come into anybody's mind and you thought, that sounds like me? Or have you thought, that sounds like someone that I love, like my partner, my child, my colleague, my friend? Because the reality is, the message today is not niche, it's human. And I'm now going to give you a few facts, not a lecture, don't worry, but because for a lot of us, information is validation. So Harvard Health talk about neurodiversity as the ways that different people think and interact with the world. And there is no right or wrong way of thinking, learning, and behaving. And critically, differences aren't deficits. Now that sentence changed my life, because for much of my life, as I've expressed, I saw my differences as flaws in me that I needed to change. And it's not that. Differences are not deficits. And in the IT sector, 53% of people identify as neurodivergent. 53%. That's half of this room, half of our friends, colleagues. And to me, I can feel it. I can feel it. Because the first time I entered the IT community, I felt like I'd found my tribe. For the first time, I didn't have to speak a different language. And together, we are a tribe. And a global study across tech sector companies like Nokia, Vodafone, Colt, they found that workplace culture and systems can create barriers for neurodivergent people across recruitment, daily working practices, and career progression. And critically, the researchers recommended that we must not enforce for formal diagnosis or disclosure in order to offer support. Because if support depends on disclosure, then people stay silent. And if support depends on paperwork, then that's not inclusion, that's bureaucracy. And in the workplace, this feeling of being different, of masking, of taking on the world to hide our imposter syndrome can cause burnout. And I want to make this clear, burnout is not just being tired. Let me describe to you how it looks for me. So one night I couldn't sleep. And if anyone here has an overactive brain, you will recognise this torture. My brain would not switch off. One thought turns to 10, 10 turns to 100, and you're watching the clock, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And then you start bargaining with the time and you think, if I go to sleep now, I'll get 3 hours sleep. If I go to sleep now, I'll get 2. But you can't, because your nervous system is stuck to on. So you get up, you pretend you're okay, you do the thing. Until one day, for me, I couldn't do it anymore. And at 5:22 a.m, I sent an email to my HR manager and I said, I can't come to work today. It was basically an incoherent ramble. And it was my raise of the white flag. And that's not like me. I never say that I can't do it. But that day I didn't have anything left in the tank. It had got too much and I went off sick for 3 weeks. And I argued with my doctor. I said, no, I can't go off. My company relies on me, they need me. And she said, no, Keegan, you need to think about your health right now. You need to think about you. And when I returned to work, the HR leader said something that I will never forget. She said, when I saw your email, I knew it didn't sound like you. I knew there was something wrong. And she didn't shame me. She didn't make it about performance. She asked, are you okay? And that was huge because I felt accepted by her. And the funny thing is, the business coped. We put ourselves under this illusion that we are the single point of failure, but we aren't. The business coped, and they always will. And if we keep carrying this weight, if we aren't supporting others when they are carrying this weight, then brilliant people will collapse. And that is why I'm so passionate about acceptance and inclusion. Because when this happens, life continues, and we struggle to balance it all, and the version of ourselves changes. We stop showing up at home. We stop being the mother that our children need, or the wife that our husband needs. We stop being patient and kind. We start exploding. We dysregulate. Then we become ashamed. And then we become ashamed of that shame. And we combust. And we collapse. And acceptance and inclusion is so important in our workplaces to prevent this from happening. And we call it a personal problem, but it's not. It's an environment problem. Now, there's another part to this story. I got my diagnosis for ADHD later on in adulthood. And some people say, why do you need a label? In fact, my husband said it first, and I get it. But it's not about the label. It's about relief. It's about understanding why the world has been so confusing for so long. Understanding why we have burnt ourselves out to exhaustion, why we have beat ourselves up and not felt good enough. And when I got my diagnosis, my life flashed before my eyes. I started to forgive myself. It was a really emotional journey. I forgave myself for the times that I'd messed up, the times that I'd sabotaged, the times that I had acted out. I forgave myself. And why at that point in my life, it was about 2 years ago now, did I decide to get the diagnosis? Well, I had met my now husband. And he, for the first time in my life, made me feel safe. Not because he understood my dysregulated behaviour. I mean, he still doesn't. But because when I was struggling with things, he accepted me, and he supported me, and he stayed. And that makes me realise it's not always about fully understanding. It's about spotting the signs. It's about supporting when it's needed. And in this IT community, in this tribe, as I've said, we make each other feel seen. We are creating this safe space with days like today. And that's huge. And if this keynote can make someone here feel seen, then that's worth it. But some of you may be sat here thinking, well, this is all good and well, but can someone like me really make it to the top? Can I really lead? Can I really get to the highest echelons that I want to achieve in my career? Well, I am living my dream job. I am the Chief Operating Officer of a company that I believe in. And I didn't get here in spite of my neurodivergence. I got here because of it. The things that I thought were flaws in me are my strengths. My empathy, the thing that makes me feel so deeply, makes me a brilliant people leader. Because I can sense tension when I walk into a room. I can see if something is off before it hits a KPI or a spreadsheet. And it makes me a great people manager. And my ADHD brain, the bit that jumps around and connects, I can understand complexity without simplifying it. I can connect the dots across strategy, delivery, people, culture. And that makes me a brilliant operator. And my lived experiences that I've shared with you today, these mean I lead without fear. I don't lead with hierarchy. I create a safe space where people feel like they don't have to always be perfect. They can be human. And that makes me an inspirational leader. And so if you're sat there thinking that because you are neurodivergent, you aren't capable or you can't get there, let me be your proof that you can. Because we feel, we care, we listen. We are the innovators, the culture builders, and we can lift others as we rise. And as long as we are not forced to mask, we can not only achieve in leadership, we can transform it. So your brain does not disqualify you. Differences should not cap your ambition, they should fuel it. So what can all of us do in the room? All of us collectively, we can make a change. We can do the small things, the human things. And these things, they're not complicated. They're things like enabling noise-cancelling headphones, making camera-optional meetings, allowing flexible hours, being clear and concise in our instructions, making information available in formats that work for different brains. Going out, learning about neurodivergence, learning to spot the signs, to understand people. And these are things that we can do very simply. Let's not make disclosure required to offer support. Let's not confuse professionalism with masking. Let's be human. And remember that diverse teams lead to 30% more productivity and improved morale. And by diverse, it means both neurodivergent and neurotypical, because together we are stronger. Together, we can achieve more. And even if you don't care about business KPIs or productivity metrics, we should do these things because it's the right thing to do, because it's human. And so my ask of everybody in here today, your homework, your takeaway, be the person that makes it safe. Safe in your workplace, in your meetings, in your homes, in your community. Be the leader that listens, that flexes, and that accepts. Be the people that create the community that is a safe space. Because being wired differently does not mean broken. It means honest, it means brave, and it means human.
Who I'm meant to be, this is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me.
You can hyper-focus on a project. You can make creative art or coding. You can solve a puzzle others couldn't. Your brains work different. That's not a flaw. It's a different kind of power. The world needs minds like yours.
It's not a condition, it's a superpower.
And dealing with these people, understanding their perspectives, how they look at life. We need to be more open to that and basically celebrate these as superpowers, because this just sort of helps us in this ever-changing world. And if everybody was the same, it would be pretty boring.
At the end of the day, you need to ensure that you're not being placed into a box based on other people's expectations or views of you. People saying, oh, you can't do this because of this reason, you can't do that because of that. That is all just a complete lie. If you believe in yourself, if you focus on your objective, you can get there, and I know that you have the talent and the ability to do that.
There's other people out there like you, you're going to find people who like you for you. Just be persistent, be brave, and be patient, because it doesn't always happen on the timeline you'd like it to happen in.
You are not alone. You are not isolated. You are not on your own. Are you unique? Yes, you are. But there's a whole network of people who are all on that same self-discovery journey that you're on, who can be there to support you, help you, and strengthen you.
If this is you, don't spend your life apologizing for the way that your brain works. Find joy in what you do and create a space to do that in a way where your mind works the best it possibly can.
Consider that this community is really open and supportive, and take care of yourself. Love you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and a huge thanks to our sponsors. As Nick said, without them we wouldn't be here today, and also with Microsoft too. Keegan Chambers, you can find me on LinkedIn. Please fill out the session survey, and thank you so much. Have a brilliant day, and I'm around if anyone wants to chat. Thank you.
All right.